Welcome back. So one of the things I didn't realize I was going to have to do was change this bottom bracket that the redrive tensioner sits into. So I actually had to get this bracket custom made at the local machine shop, and then I actually drilled the holes for it. So this is what it looks like, and it just picks up the two tabs where the other little T bracket was in there. And the reason why I had to have that is because now this thing's on a spring. That main shaft there needs room to go like all the way through that block, and the other one had a bolt going all the way through, and obviously it would have, that shaft there on the spring thing would have collided with the bolt, so had to kind of split it out. And anyway, this is the quickest way to do it, and retrofit it into those two tabs there that are basically welded to the engine mount frame. So that's what it looks like there, and now I can tension up the spring, and it has the same amount of tension all the time regardless of temperature or anything like that. So it's all looking good, and I've got to do a test flight like that, and hopefully the oil leak is all fixed as well.
Raptor 352 Tango Delta, left turn out approved, runway 17, clear for takeoff.
Left turn out approved, runway 17, clear for takeoff, 352 Tango Delta.
So after fixing that tensioner, I actually did some ground runs the previous day to this.
Approaching runway 22. Entered runway 22, 5,500 feet remaining.
Yeah, and then we had beautiful weather this morning for another flight.
Approaching runways 22 and 17. Entered runway 17, 7,800 feet remaining.
So the goal for this flight was, first of all, to see if my oil leak was fixed, and secondly, to see if I had any issues with the tensioner, with it sort of, obviously it shouldn't tighten up as things get warmer anymore, but, I wanted to compare and see how performance was and everything like that. So very similar to the last flight, I was just going to, orbit east of the field, and I'd already called the tower to arrange that. So they were okay with that, and my goal was to sort of climb up to about 2,500 again and just sort of do a direct comparison. And so that's what I did. It was beautiful weather. It was a little bit smoother on the climb out this time, not as much wind as the other day, and then of course it completely stabilized again. I think at about 1,300 feet, 1,400 feet, the air was just completely smooth again. And in fact, I don't even think there was much wind at altitude. And the other thing that I did this time was I vented the static port back into the cabin, so kind of like an alternate static, and I wanted to see how that was performing. And just in comparing the altimeter setting on the G3X to what the Garmin camera is showing up, and also to what my iPad's showing up, it's definitely showing a couple of hundred feet higher. But I think a lot of that has to do with the the altimeter setting or the barometer setting that I'm setting on the G3X, just setting it to what the tower is reporting. So that's potentially giving a number that's different than what the GPS camera and the iPad are giving back. Anyway, I still need to do some more research on that and just see how far off my static is. But once the aircraft is level and stable, if the static port is vented into the cabin, it should be as good as any other alternate static on any other aircraft that's vented inside the cabin. And if there's any other erroneous reading for airspeed, then potentially it's coming directly from the pitot tube.
November 2, Tango Delta, center hold pattern, right turns.
Right turns over here east of the field, 2 Tango Delta.
And my goal with respect to temperatures on this one was to keep the oil temperature below 240. I know I can go higher, but I just wanted to see, what power settings it would take to do that while still being able to, initiate a climb up to 2,500.
Alpha Tower, Skyhawk 309 Bravo Romeo is west, 10 west of the airport, in stop.
November 309 Bravo Romeo, enter left base, runway 35.
Entering left base, runway 35, Donna Bravo Romeo.
So for the complete flight, temperatures only touched 240 in 2 different occasions, so that was good.
November 309 Bravo Romeo, wind 120 at 4, altimeter 3041.
3041. We'll report 3 miles left base for 35.
And ultimately, late into this flight, I actually got an indication from my oil sump saying that the oil was low, and that comes on when the oil dips just below the absolute maximum oil level, and it's like an early warning that your oil is down below absolute maximum. And so I attributed that to oil building up in the redrive or oil leaking somewhere. So at that point, and it went off right away, and so I looked at that and said, all right, well, I think it's time to head back now just to be cautious. And I saw it another time as I was just doing the last turn, preparing for the descent. And in getting back to back on the ground and that, I ended up still having an oil leak, and I figured out where it's coming from. So the back housing of the redrive has a back plate on it that has another larger O-ring on it, and that O-ring is it's one of the black O-rings, probably the same material as the other one I just replaced. And so ultimately, potentially that's degrading as well with the heat, with the 240, 250 degree heat that's going through the redrive, the oil temperature there when it gets the maximum. But it shouldn't really be under pressure anyway. And so I've come to the conclusion that what's happening is when the governor is running at the high pressure setting, in other words, pulling the prop back to the most coarse pitch setting, there's enough oil feeding into that redrive, and then some of it sort of spurting out past the sort of close tolerance area in the oil shuttle, that it's coming out fast enough into the redrive main housing that it's not draining out through the AN8 line that I have in there. So what I've actually already done today after this flight, went down to the hydraulic shop and had them make me an AN10 line, and I've also up the fittings in there. So I've got the same NPT fittings in there, but I've basically made them so they have the same ID as what the AN10 line is, just sort of drilled them out a tiny little bit. So that will give me about a 55% better flow rate of oil draining out of the redrive, and hopefully that'll relieve the pressure that's building up in the main housing of the redrive. So that'll be the next flight, is to test that, and if I don't get any oil leaks from that, then I'll know that I'm not getting a pressure build up, and then I can start exploring, doing a climb where I run the oil temperature up to as much as 250 or more, because I've had it to 265 but not sustained. I think it can sustain 250 all day long. I mean, the synthetic oil is quite capable of running at 300 degrees Fahrenheit sustained, and even more. And I don't intend on going anywhere near there. But I'm able to climb right now. I didn't have any problems, as you'll see a little bit later in this video, climbing up to 3,000 feet. And I ended up cutting the flight short because I saw that oil, the low oil light come on. And it was wise to come back, because as I say, I did have the oil leak there. And what's happening was the oil was just very, very fine coming out of that back housing there, where the housing plate sort of bolts on to the main part of the housing, and I bet you it was like spraying out in a very fine sort of flat sheet just on this one little section, and so becoming a mist of oil, and that's what we're sort of getting everywhere. So the other O-ring from the previous video was actually leaking and is no longer leaking, so that one's fixed. But then this other one is still happening now. Now I can probably get the larger O-ring, and that one's about, 4 inches diameter. I can probably get that and replace it, but ideally I don't want to have that sort of pressure in the redrive anyway. So I need to make sure it's draining correctly first, So hopefully the fact that it was only doing this, when you got the prop into the most coarse pitch setting, and it took quite a while before it started leaking oil, and then there was only a little bit. Potentially this 50% increase in the drainage, there should be plenty enough to allow it to drain and not build up any pressure in there, so it should all just basically drain back to the sump before there's a chance for any sort of oil filling up the redrive main housing or building up sort of any kind of pressure. So yeah, definitely learning some stuff. Also tried the autopilot on this flight, and it sort of clicked off again. I think the control forces are a bit heavy for it, but I need to explore that a little bit more.
Not up the tower. 300
not above
Romeo is 3 miles west on a left base for 35.
Skyhawk 309 above, Romeo inside, runway 35, clear to land.
Runway 35, clear to land, full stop.
Yeah, so I think it wouldn't hurt to increase the size of those spades to make the control forces a little bit lighter in the roll axis. And also it's still a bit heavy in the pitch axis as well, the elevator is. And I think just the aerodynamic forces pushing on that elevator are just holding it in that position, and so it takes quite a bit of effort, to make a pitch change when you're sort of at a cruise speed. Anyway, these are all the sort of things that you've got to dial in and get it right. But I mean, once it's up at altitude here, it's like it's on rails. Honestly, it's just so smooth there. It doesn't want to deviate. It's really good. Anyway, so there's a bunch of spinning around and doing laps around here, so I'm not going to bore you with showing the whole thing in real time, but this is what it looked like at 20 times normal speed for the next couple of laps. And so what I did was basically leveled off and wanted to just see what power setting everything would stabilize at, and with the intention of keeping the oil temperature below 240. So I believe the coolant temperature was around about 210 for most of the time, maybe 205. It was showing up as 208 most of the time, I think, on the one going to the front intercooler. And so that's pretty indicative of what's happening in the engine. And then after that, what I was going to do was, once I had it stabilized, I said, all right, well, let's just pitch the nose up a little bit here and see what it can do in terms of a climb. So I kept the power setting the same as it was cruising here, and then just pitched up a little bit just to see how it would climb. I didn't really change the power setting, although I did pull the prop a little bit forward, so I took it from the sort of 2980 that it was running at to about 3070 or something, so maybe 100 RPM up on there. So there you can see the coolant temperature 210 coming back from the engine. So coolant is definitely solved right now, and it's just a case of where do I want to push the oil temperatures to for a sustained climb. And as I said, I don't want to do it yet until I've figured out, or until I'm 100% sure that I've got no oil leaking out, because obviously when the oil is hotter, it will be more runny and it will probably leak out even more, and so I don't really want to make a big mess there. And the amount of oil coming out now is trivial, but because it's sort of spraying out in a fine mist, it's getting all over the place in just one side of the cowling there. So yeah, I don't want that to happen anymore. And if it still if it still builds up pressure in there, I mean, I really need to relieve that first. Changing the oil ring or the O-ring out is going to stop the leak, but it's not going to fix the pressure buildup in the redrive. And the way it was designed is not supposed to have any pressure in it. It's basically supposed to just all drain out of there and back into the sump. And the sump on this particular engine is running at a vacuum. So what's happening right now is that the pressure is building up in the redrive and it's pushing back into the sump, and it should just be basically draining back into the sump, with the sump just sort of sucking the oil back out from the redrive. But anyway, as you can see here, I'm just slowly making a climb, and according to the G3X, I actually made it over 3,000 feet, and the GPS was slightly less than that.
Out of the tower, 9 Bravo Romeo is left downwind 35, touch and go, midfield.
Skyhawk 9 Bravo Romeo, runway 35, clear touch and go.
Clear touch and go on 35, 9 Bravo Romeo.
So ForeFlight said that I logged 44 minutes in the air, and it was saying that, let's see, my maximum altitude was 2,900 and I think about 50 something feet, 55 feet, and my maximum airspeed, or ground speed I should say, was I think 137 or 139, something like that. Yeah, about 138 I think was the maximum that I hit. You know, I'm not trying to go super fast speeds right now because, you know, obviously got the power pulled back and the prop pulled back. And I've actually been working with the guys over there on the West Coast. We've actually been working on a MATLAB script where we can basically select a density altitude, select a throttle setting, and select a prop setting, and it gives us speeds.
Southbound tower to 4657, left downwind for 35.
Endeavor 4657, under left downwind, runway 35, report midfield. Wind 060 at 6, altimeter 3041.
Okay, report midfield for 35 to 4657.
So we're still getting that MATLAB script sort of dialed in, but it's pretty accurate for the numbers and stuff that we've already done with, you know, the flights that I've done, in terms of, you know, taking into account the drag of the aircraft and the flat plate area.
Minus Juliet, Bluff Tower.
Maintenance Juliet, request to cross technically, Charlie.
Minus Juliet, standby.
Roger, standing by.
Minus Juliet, cross taxiway, Charlie.
Cross taxiway, Charlie, maintenance Juliet.
And one of the nice things about the MATLAB script is allows us to, you know, just make projections about how what sort of, you know, indicated airspeeds we'll get at certain power, prop, and altitude settings. So it's looking pretty good right now in terms of projections for, you know, like a 10,000 foot cruise, as long as I can, you know, get the power settings and not have the engine sort of getting too hot. So I'll have to see how that plays out.
Skyhawk 9 Bravo Romeo, continue your upwind, all player crosswind. Traffic, a regional jet entering left down 135.
I'll extend my upwind, you'll call my crosswind, 9 Bravo Romeo.
Endeavor 4657 is midfield downwind for 35.
Endeavor 4657, runway 35, clear to land.
Clear to land 35, Endeavor 4657.
King Air,
medevac tree says no prop over short 35.
Skyhawk 9 Bravo Romeo, traffic not a factor. Start your crosswind.
Starting my crosswind, 9 Bravo Romeo.
And there you can see I've hit the maximum altitude for the day. So GPS indicating just shy of 2,900.
Medevac 377 Papa, 511 heading, climb maintain 3000, runway 35, clear for takeoff.
Runway heading, climb maintain 3000, 77 Papa.
And it was around about here where I got the first indication of the low oil light coming on the MOTEC display. And as I said, it just came on very briefly, just maybe for 10 seconds or something. And, you know, I looked at it and just, you know, nothing weird going on. Oil pressure was still good and everything like that. And it was there exactly for this reason, to indicate if the redrive was sort of taking up too much oil for any given reason, or for some other reason, you know, losing oil. So as soon as it comes off maximum, you know, that light comes on. And then of course it went away, so it meant that, you know, the oil was sort of draining back into the sump.
Endeavor 4657, turn base now.
Okay, return our base in our 4657.
Alpha Tower 309 Bravo Romeo is midfield, left downwind 35, full stop.
Skyhawk 9 above Romeo, you're number 2, following a regional jet. On 7 mile left base, runway 35, clear to land.
I've got traffic in sight.
Medevac 77 Papa, contact departure.
Contact departure, 77 Papa.
Anyway, so at that point I decided it was time to sort of, you know, bring it back down.
Skyhawk 9 above Romeo, roger, follow that traffic.
We're following that traffic, 9 Bravo Romeo.
And of course the Delta flight was on its way in. So I just, you know, took my time just sort of circling there, you know, did another turn before I called tower to say that I wanted to return, because I didn't want to sort of get involved with the Delta flight coming in.
Skyhawk 9 Bravo Romeo, approximate turbulence.
And so I called tower and requested to return for a full stop landing. So they basically just asked me to do another lap, and then on the southbound leg, that became my downwind, and then they cleared me to land on 3-5. So I just did that last lap, which is this one here. Now I'm on the downwind, and then I start my descent or final descent for landing. So gear coming down, and 3 green. And then you obviously a little bit lower down I started to hit the bumps again, but it wasn't bad today. In fact, it was just a beautiful day, and actually kind of so lucky to have moved down here to Valdosta, because you know, 70-degree day today pretty much. I think it hit 69, but it was beautiful and pristine, so not bad for, you know, just a couple of days after the winter solstice. If it stays like this for the rest of winter, I'll be completely happy. It's, you know, it's nice in the mornings. The temperature's been down in the low or mid 30s overnight, quite a few nights and that, but that makes for good sort of cool weather flying in the morning, which is good. So overall, pretty happy with how this flight turned out, and as I said, I've already changed out this one oil line to an AN10 from an 8, and so the next flight will be just to test that out, and if I don't have an oil leak, then I can start exploring, you know, taking the oil temperature up to, you know, maybe 250 in a sustained climb, and see how that plays out. So yeah, everything's progressing a bit slowly but decently.
1 mile final runway 35 at Kilo Victor Lima Delta. Warning, airport not in current route. 500.
And with respect to the tensioner, I think that spring has done the trick. It's going to be fine now on a colder day. There's no chance of the belt slipping or anything like that, and I didn't notice any lack of power or any drop off in power, and when I got on the ground everything was moving still nicely, so those belts didn't get overly tight. The spring is taking up any extra.
Tower, Main Juliet. Tower, Main Juliet, I'm at Foxtrot on 17. Request to cross taxiway Foxtrot.
Mainland Juliet, cross, taxiway Foxtrot.
Cross taxiway Foxtrot, Main Juliet.
And so that was that flight. and it was, as I said, 44 minutes altogether. I think I burnt about 6 or 7 gallons of diesel altogether. So pretty happy with that, how that turned out. Hopefully this video wasn't too long. As I said, I've got to keep them a bit shorter now. Anyway, that's the video. Thanks again for watching, and tune in again for the next one. Cheers.